There's something quietly fascinating about the generation tucked between two louder worlds, those born roughly between 1976 and 1985, the ones sometimes called Xennials. They never had a clean label for most of their lives, and in a strange way, that uncertainty became part of who they are. They grew up analog and came of age digital. And the psychological weight of that transition shaped them in ways that are still unfolding, still being understood, even now. Think about what it meant to be a child in the late 70s and early 80s. Life moved slower then, not because people were lazy, but because the infrastructure of speed had not yet arrived. You waited for things. You waited for Saturday morning cartoons. You waited for a letter in the mail. You waited for a friend to come home so you could knock on their door because there was no other way to reach them. That kind of waiting built something inside a person, a quiet patience that would later feel both like a gift and a burden in a world that stopped waiting for anything at all. Xennials were the last generation to have a childhood largely unsupervised by technology. They played outside until the streetlights came on. They rode bikes far from home without anyone tracking them. They got lost and found their way back. That experience of navigating the world without a safety net of constant communication gave them something deep, a confidence in their own resourcefulness, a sense that they could figure things out even when things felt overwhelming. The transition to the digital world happened right in the middle of their young adult lives. They were in their late teens or early 20s when email became something people actually used. They were young enough to adapt, but old enough to remember what it felt like before. That dual memory of the analog past and the digital present is one of the most defining psychological features of this group. They can feel nostalgic for a world that no longer exists, while simultaneously being genuinely comfortable in the world that replaced it. That is not a contradiction. That is just what it means to be a Xennial. There is also something worth noting about their emotional landscape. They grew up during a period when talking about feelings was not exactly encouraged. Kids were told to toughen up, to not be so sensitive, to just deal with things. And yet, by the time Xennials reached adulthood, the cultural conversation around mental health was beginning to shift. So many of them found themselves carrying the emotional habits of a stoic upbringing while gradually discovering a vocabulary for inner experience that had never been handed to them as children. That discovery could feel like relief and like grief all at once, because naming something you have carried silently for years is a complicated kind of freedom. The relationships Xennials formed are also shaped by this dual identity. They learned to connect before social media, when connection required effort and intentionality. A phone call meant something. Showing up meant something. Even now, many Xennials carry that sense that real connection should feel something, should require something. That can make them feel out of step with newer relational norms, and it can also make them quietly steadfast friends and partners, people who still believe that the slow way is sometimes the true way. Work is another place where the Xennial psychology becomes visible. They entered the workforce during a time of relative optimism and carried an expectation that hard work would lead to stability. Many have had to revise that belief more than once, and that revision has not always been easy. But there is a resilience there, born of growing up without guarantees, of knowing how to make do, of having played outside in the rain and discovering that the rain was actually fine. They are quietly adaptable, willing to learn new things even when learning feels uncomfortable, because discomfort is something they learned to sit with a long time ago, out there in the slow and patient world that made them who they are.